Hi, welcome to our presentation. This is for Joy of Sec Cultural Analysis. I'm Maddie Talbert.
I'm Devin.
Okay. But basically what happens is that the characters, Bart and Homer, which is like father and son, they meet recruiters for a religious cult called Movimentarianism. And it's basically a cult, but they don't know that at the time. And they meet them at the airport. The recruiters infiltrate their hometown, basically, because Bart and Homer like initially meet them and they're introduced in the episode. And then they find out that they're like going throughout their town and also convincing other people to join their cult. And they brainwash the residents to follow the leader, which is like, the leader is like kind of like the leader of the cult, but he's like a very anonymous figure. Like they don't really know who he is, but they are brainwashed to believe that he's basically God. And like, they praise him and everything, but they do this through an orientation video. And during this time, Homer, he's very difficult to break. And they finally get him like through food to break. And but basically what happens, like all the residents of Springfield are able to break and get brainwashed, and the residents move to the cult's compound. And this is like where they are forced to like wear the same clothes, and they're all like collectively like believe that the leaders, they're the guy, and they do like a lot of farm work and everything. And basically, but Marge, the wife, she resists and tricks her brainwashed family to leave by like deprogramming them, and like she basically gets like outsiders of the cult to like help her like pressure her family members to break from their beliefs. So yeah.
And then basically Homer goes back to the compound after he's like back to normal and reveals to the rest of the cult members that the whole thing is like a big fraud. And then the leader tries to escape, but all the members hold him hostage until he returns like a large amounts of money that he stole from them. And then the family returns home and they basically just talk about how great it is to finally like be able to think independently again. And as the show is ending, it cleverly asserts that we are being brainwashed with the network's slogan. And we'll touch more on that later.
Dual modes in social cognition. So there's implicit culture, explicit culture, and reification. So implicit culture is intuitive, effortless, and taken for granted. An example is rationales or motivations that underlie actions, such as like the 7-day work week. You don't even realize that this is a cultural thing. And then there's explicit culture, which is like very obvious, like cultural, like objectional, effortful, and logical. An example is observable behaviors, rituals, and symbols. Reification is when humans forget the fact that that they were the one that created the social products themselves. So through this process, social institutions gain their legitimacy, thus maintaining social order. So in some implicit culture examples that are present throughout the episode is so it's like indoctrination, education, and nuclear family structures. And for example, like the followers of the leader, like the leader directs all of their values, where they don't really understand, like in hindsight, they don't really understand why they believe these things. It's because they're brainwashed. And so all it, like the rationale behind it, like as discussed in the previous slide, rationale is like a big thing for implicit culture. So it does have rationale, but like you don't really realize it. So the Simpsons are brainwashed, metaphorically similar to society, to value, which is what we touch on later, to value the leader and to sacrifice their livelihoods for him. So they're working on a farm and giving up their property and their money to this guy. And the rationale for support of this leader is based on the brainwashing videos. That's the rationale. And it's evident that the initial programming was effective. So they don't even they just praise him. They're not really sure why, but they're brainwashed. And there's some rationale behind that. But it's implicit that their culture, they don't even question it. They're like, this leader is so amazing. So Lisa points out, for example, that the leader is living in luxury while they are working in the fields, but the father is content when the Rolls Royce splashes him with mud. Another example is education. And so it's taught in like Lisa's class, like one of the clips is that the leader creates lightning and thunder. And it is deemed inappropriate for Lisa to publicly contradict the leader and was threatened with a bad grade. Also, there's the nuclear family structure. So in comparison to their life in Springfield, the Simpsons lack a nuclear family structure in the commune. They are expected to form family with their entire community. So this is just like expected, like a cultural thing. For example, the Simpsons take for granted the nuclear family structure before entering the commune. After exiting the commune, they return back to the nuclear family structures because that is standard in regular society, similar to the culture within the United States. And then the example of explicit culture it's like very like obvious examples, like observable. So there's rituals, clothing, and the hero/symbol. So the rituals is like, for example, they have mass marrying, and they also have dancing. So this is an observable behavior where you go to a ceremony, and this is obviously like something like a cultural object in the commune's culture, and it's celebrated with a ceremony. And Homer uses the reason to convince Marge to remarry. So for clothing, there's gowns that they all have to wear like throughout, like they're always like wearing this gray and white gown, and all members wear the same uniformed gowns. And then doctrinators, they all like differentiate themselves from the people in the commune because they coordinate clothing, and they just like look a lot different. So there's like a kind of like a hierarchy, and this is like an explicit like example of culture because it's physical. And the hero/symbol is another example. There's the leader, who's a community-wide symbol that is praised, and this is also a cultural explicit thing that controls, as like they praise as a cultural object. And there's reification examples. And this is when watching TV and consuming cultural objects visually, and the family claims how nice it is to think independently. However, when the Fox logo appears on the screen, the characters appear to demonstrate observable behaviors of brainwashing. Example of reification is when, because it satirically demonstrates how individuals within society forget about social products and thus are not thinking independently. As a result of the demonstrated process, social institutions gain their legitimacy and thus maintain social order. Large and wealthy, such as like the large and wealthy corporation of Fox, that continues to influence culture throughout the output of media. Dual process in which their culture is a reflective mirror, like things are going back and forth from like Fox creating culture for us, and then us giving them the cultural objects or content to come up with. Okay.
So our next kind of theory that went along with this episode was the Durkheimian theory and the social solidarity aspect. So the just like general social solidarity is the connections between individuals that allow them to form a cohesive social unit. And in the case of Joy's sect, the subcategory of this, of mechanical solidarity, is most applicable. And mechanical solidarity is the social cohesion and integration based on the similarity of individuals in the group, including shared beliefs, values, and emotional ties between members of the group. The Simpsons family and the rest of the movementarians are a part of a cult in which they're deprived of individuality, they praise the same leader, and they share the same goals and beliefs. So thus they align most with the structural tenets of mechanical solidarity. And then just more on that, they have literally no division of labor. Like they all work in the like lima bean fields, I think. They work in the bean fields all day, and they share like a communal living space. Harsh legal repercussions for attempts to leave the cult were like pretty serious. When Marge tries to escape the first time and like basically go back to original Springfield, she has to run through like a ton of crazy stuff, and like basically like you get killed, or most people had gotten killed like if they had tried to escape. And they also have a strong collective consciousness, and like as you can see in the chart, those are all identifying factors of a society comprised of mechanical solidarity. And then our third kind of theory is Hobbes' one on the invention of tradition. And so the invention of tradition occurs more frequently when a rapid transformation of society weakens or destroys the social patterns for which old traditions have been designed, producing new ones to which they were not applicable. Obviously, the rapid transformation here was the cult like overtaking Springfield. So that got rid of all previously held customs of daily life in Springfield and transformed the society into one collective entity rather than individual people. Old traditions were specific and strongly binding social practices like marriage freedom, um, attending school, and loyalty to societal norms. And then invented traditions tend to be unspecific and vague as to the nature of values, rights, and obligations of the group's membership, i.e., praise of the same leader, spaceship, working on the fields for no reason, systematic eating times, and group dances.
Okay. So some specific examples of old versus new things. So for example, like a new thing is independent thinking that has previously been mentioned in the other slides. The Simpsons are brainwashed through various means, such as videos, leadership, and education during their cult experience. And they're basically like encouraged to think collectively and believe the same truths. Like they all have to praise the leader, and they're not allowed to stray from like they're not supposed to question any communal opinions. So for example, like when Lisa's like, why does the leader get to like have that car? His like the Homer gets mad at her and was like, be quiet. And same with Marge, like whenever she started like questioning the authority of the leader versus everyone else, and started like complaining, she would like basically left. And like when they're like, yeah, you can leave is one of the parts, but then she like it's really difficult for her to leave basically. So versus the old, like, so what's in regular society basically is what the Simpsons is portrayed based off of like American society. So in the regular society and controlled by the cult, they are able to form their own thoughts independently. And Bart, such as explained like earlier, Bart even remarks how great it is to have the ability to do so when they return home and are watching television. He's like, oh, it's so great to think independently, which is further shown that it's not. But anyways, the old is like they have it's the belief that they have their own opinion and they can stray, like compared to the commune, they can have their own individual opinions, and it doesn't have to be like everyone has to believe this, everyone has to wear this, and everyone has to do this ceremony and get married this way. And like, yeah, so there's also access to media. So the new one, the access to media outlets are restricted because like obviously it's a cult and they don't want them to know that the outside world exists, and they want them to like really believe in their authority. And cult members are forced to work on the field, like so they don't question anything. And old, however, in regular society, Bart enjoys freedom, like reading comments, and the family is able to watch the television together whenever they would like. And so that's basically the same thing with freedom though. But yeah, access to media is a different thing. And all these like the new ones, let's see. Okay. Yeah, the new ones, if you notice, are very vague. Like they're kind of like, why are we doing this basically? And they're like they're not very specific, but all they have to do is like being a community, while the old ones are very specific. And that's present theme throughout all these examples. And so they have the freedom to consume, like the new ones. The new rules are the new traditions are the members of the cult are forced to eat peas and lentils for every meal and are constrained by ration and meal times. But it's very vague, like why, or like it's a very vague rule, basically, or tradition. However, it is demonstrated in previous society how Homer is used to freely consuming food in his traditional society of Springfield because his wife is able to break his brainwashing by offering him beer. And this signals that like there is a difference between the new and the old traditions, such as in relationships while they're on the cult property. Marge remarks how it's odd to remarry once again, even though they are already remarried. I mean, they have already been married, even though yeah. So this signals how there is a break of tradition from their previous society in Springfield, in which it's different. There's different expectations, and it's vague, like why. While the old ones are like the binding, and it even like they snap back to the reality, and they're like it's so binding that they have to like from the vague traditions they remember that it's so binding. They remember like the specific reasons why, and they like go back to it without even thinking. So yeah. Okay, so I think that's the end of our presentation. So yeah, bye.
Bye, thanks.